working? Is it working? Oh, good. Well, now, be careful what I say now. Now I'm mic'd up. I'm just going to pour some water, if you don't mind, and then we'll get good. Which I'll never drink. Right, thank you for joining us here today. Before I get started on the panel and the chat and everything, we're just going to get everyone to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start from that end and get her to introduce herself, and then coming around.
So hi, my name is Erla. I am been in the games industry now for almost 2 decades. I have been mainly in business development, strategic alignment and scaling. I'm currently as head of business development for a company called Lootlocker.
Thank you. Kirsty.
Hey everybody, my name's Kirsty Kirby. I'm the Studio Operations and Engagement Manager at Lab 42. Lab 42 are part of a bigger group of studios called Sumo Digital, and my job is kind of try to make work a nice place to be.
Hi, I'm Kat Henderson, and I work for Electric Square and Lively Studios. I'm their HR coordinator, but don't let that put you off. I also try and make it a nice place to work, and I've been there for 3 years now, but I've got a lot of previous experience in that role from other jobs. So.
Brilliant, thank you. And for those who don't know me, I'm Sarah, and I run Fresh Seed, which is a people and culture business to games in the wider creative sector. But today we're going to be talking about the business case for mental health. And before I turn to the panel, I wanted to just give some context to why we think this is a really important subject. So according to Mental Health First Aid, mental health or mental ill health costs the economy billions. Depending on what research you look at, it's anywhere between 20 to 56 billion pounds a year. So it's safe to say that in the last few years that all of our wellbeing's been pretty tested. And so today we're going to explore what that looks like and why it's important for studios to factor it in and how to, because we've all got different budgets, and with the cost of living crisis, and those budgets are tested more and more, and obviously with the challenges within the industry at the moment. But so 1 in 5 workers reported feeling unable to manage stress and pressure in the workplace. A third of managers, and I think this is really key, feel out of their depth supporting their team with mental health concerns. 29% of those managers said more support and training from their employer would help them support other team members, and 10% of employees are currently seeking support for their mental health. In games, I think that about 38% of the industry reported a mental health condition or challenge, and that was in the UK census of 2022. I'm looking to Sarah for a nod there. Yeah. So research has actually shown that lived experiences are a really great way of demonstrating to organisations, individuals, leaders, employees, how their own challenges. And if any of you were in the self-advocacy session earlier, this sort of leans into that leans into what can you share and what can you help do to help others. So enough waffle from me. I'm going to pass on to our fabulous panel, and I'll start asking some questions that hopefully lean into those figures a little bit. So as we begin today, I'd like to hear from you and what your studios are doing to help individuals with mental health challenges. I'm going to leave it to you to choose. Put yourself forward, people. Push yourselves into that uncertainty and embrace it.
Right, I'll go. Right, I apologise. I need notes because I'm nervous, so I apologise. So at Lab 42, we kind of try to break things down into 3 different areas. So first of all, we try to prevent or reduce the risk of mental health challenges in the workplace, and that's an important place to start, and that's a lot about company culture. Secondly, we look at awareness, and we aim to have as many folk aware of mental health challenges as possible, and that way we're able to spot them as early as possible and maybe intervene. And then finally, we want to be able to sort of confidently be able to address mental health challenges if they do come. And that might be access to professional support, it might be rehabilitation if somebody needs some time off, and then introducing them back into the workplace. We're very fortunate that we're part of a very large organisation, so we have like the financial resource to be offering up really comprehensive EAP packages. We have access to private healthcare. We've got a terrific L&D team who are able to train our line managers in things like unconscious bias or having difficult conversations to try and ease these sorts of things. And we also have a range of mental health first aiders who are absolutely invaluable. So we've got all sorts of things going on at Lab 42 in the mental health space.
Amazing. Kat or Ali, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I can only sort of echo Kirsty's point in that prevention is like key. So obviously, like, you know, if whenever we have new starters, I mean, it goes for people who are just starting at the company or people who already work there. You know, we kind of want to make it as like a safe space as possible. And we want to make it a place for people to work where they feel that they can be completely open and comfortable about any issues or concerns they might have. I think it's kind of quite a high percentage in the gaming industry in general that we have a lot of neurodiverse people working for us. I'm one of them. You know, I've got ADHD. So again, as you were talking about lived experiences, I think it's really important to have somebody like me in the role that I'm in. Just to be able to identify little things and see things in people. So I try and be as personable as possible. But as a company, we do a whole ton of things, and it's something I'm really proud of. It was one of the things that attracted me to work with them in the first place. So we obviously have trained mental health first aiders. I'm one of them. We do a wellbeing week every year, which I organise. So it's an entire week based on mindfulness, well-being, and anything that's also creative. So it's like, you know, things that people can express themselves doing that they enjoy, but also is a welcoming atmosphere that they can be around other like-minded people. We have our own initiative called Connected, which our lovely marketing manager, Jerome Henry, set up. And it's basically, it was born off the back of our DE&I committee, which I used to chair. And then when Jerome came, he wanted to make it bigger and something that was a lot more accessible for everybody. We have a lot of studios, so, you know, it's already, we have a lot of diversity there anyway. So we wanted to make it as accessible for everybody, and it's just a platform for people to, talk, share their experiences and do things and get involved in community projects to do with mental health and inclusivity and all of those wonderful things. And yeah, we're always providing training, always training, especially for leadership and management, because as you said, like, you know, if somebody doesn't know how to necessarily communicate properly, like how someone's feeling or to identify those things in their staff, then we want to give them the tools to be able to do that. And so it's something that we do a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, okay, we might come back to that, thank you. Ella, is there anything else that your Loot Locker's doing on top of those? Or
So my role with what we are at Loot Locker is a bit different because we're 11. So it's a very small studio, but with experienced people. But when it comes to everything you said is correct, and in my previous larger companies, everything like that is in place. But as a small studio and very bootstrapped, we had to figure out how we can be there for one another.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really admire is the honesty, and it is the open communication that we have, and the support for one another. And for me, the first thing that I said on my first company call when I looked at the team was, Christ, guys, I had my driver's license when most of you were born, because I am the only woman, but also far older than the rest of the team. But I've never worked with as honest, hardworking, supportive team of individuals that are also strong as a team as I have been there. So it is about being honest, be respectful, go into all conversations with the intent of listening, not to react and misunderstand what each is saying. And we are doing this together. And that's the difference between being a small team, where we had to really rely on one another, versus being able to be having the options of getting a little bit lost in the crowd in the larger companies.
Yes, and I think a theme that's running through here is compassion here.
Yeah.
So for those who aren't aware, there's kind of, we've got the sympathy, which is the sort of bit where I'm really sorry that, that you've got that. There's the empathy that must be very hard for you. I hear that you are struggling with that. Compassion is, what can I do to help you?
Exactly.
And what could I do to get up close and help you? And I think a theme that's sort of running here is you trying different, diverse ways to help in that compassion space. Have you seen, an uptake? Kirsty, I'm going to kind of come to you because you're kind of one of the bigger studio groups. Have you seen an uptake, an increase during the last few years in sort of wellbeing support?
Yeah.
I guess it goes to that. Yeah. Well, I guess it goes to
Short
that saying
answer.
to an extent, doesn't it? But have you had to increase any kind of your offering from pre-pandemic sort of thing to where you are now?
Yeah, I think the penny has dropped at Sumo, how influential work can be on mental well-being, which when you step back, it's fairly obvious. You're spending sort of 8 hours a day in an environment. Obviously, it's going to have a big impact on your mental health. Sumo conducted a survey quite recently, and having a mental well-being offering was the third most valued benefit that we offered. I think pension and holidays came number 1 and 2, but it shows you how important mental health is. So I think we've started to realise that it's not only about retention of staff, it's about attracting staff as well.
Yeah.
It's like a really valued thing to do. So yes, there's been more of a focus on mental health over more recent years, and I also think it's got a little bit more sophisticated as well. So the whole sort of idea of intersectionalities coming into play more, and I think studios are noticing that. I don't know if you feel the same, but ethnicity, sexuality, gender identity, disability, all of those things are starting to factor now, and we're starting to sort of tailor more so than we ever did. And neurodiversity is quite a hot
So we've
topic
got
at
a
the moment.
better understanding, really, haven't we, of where mental health plays into the intersection, as you say, of other, issues around ED&I, and not issues, that's the wrong word, but challenges, and how to overcome them. So you're in a small studio, and if there's only 11 people, and you're that kind of up close and personal, you're kind of feeling that a lot more honestly. So is there ways that, have you seen an increase in the last sort of few years in this space? Or has it just always been the same because it's quite small? Or
I think being small, we need to be so careful, but also caring, because it's quite easy to come in and blow steam and if you want to misunderstand what one person says, you will. But what we've done, and this has been the priority basically from day one for me, was since I joined, and it's been now over a year and a half, is that each Friday when we have a retro where we go through the week, and it is the bad, the good, and the ugly, and then we choose. And for somebody who has ADHD and need to wait in line using Discord to be able to react or be able to ask questions, that's been an interesting one for me, especially being so afraid of if I don't get in straight away, I'll probably forget what it was that I wanted to ask. But at the same time, it is that kindness, but also being very structured, because we have to be. There is no space for like any toxicity. There isn't. So if there is anything, we will just say it straight away. Because is what you were saying to me, do I understand it correctly? Is this what you meant? And when we are this few, and each and every one of us have a big part to play in our company, it kind of is less chances of that little pocket of toxicity or being grumpy because somebody else misunderstood what it was that you were saying, what you were meaning. So instead, we just come out straight with it. But one of the things like I've said to everybody is like, don't ever underestimate the power of I'm sorry I misunderstood, I'm sorry I didn't mean to hurt you, because I don't think there is a lot of people within our organization that will truly be spiteful or mean.
Yeah, so it's that sort of empathy, understanding again as we come back to that. Kat, I wanted to sort of focus on kind of where we're going with productivity. So when we're building that case for mental health and we're looking at why you should have it, one of the things is often that, what's the return on my investment? Well, when we talked before about that, we all agreed return on our investment when it comes to mental health shouldn't really be the case, should it? We should just be, it is about being kind and compassionate to people generally. But the output of kind of, when we support people, we do see a stronger connection. So do you think these measures are improving productivity and helping?
100%. And again, I'm just going to copy what Kirsty said, but if you wanted a kind of a real tangible look at how it does boost productivity, it is in retention of staff, 100%. If we're going to talk turkey, we all know that hiring new people costs a lot of money, it takes a lot of time. If you're going to want to replace somebody, that whole process it's a lot of hard work and it costs a lot of money. Whereas if you just invest in the people that you already have, and they're doing a good job and they love their job, but perhaps they're struggling with mental health or things at home which is causing them to struggle with their workload or whatever, if you invest in that member of staff who's having a hard time, then you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. Number one, you're doing the right thing by looking after somebody who's worked for you and is loyal to your company and loves their job. But number two, you're helping somebody get through something difficult and it benefits everybody. And it just sets an example, which I think it's the right way to go. It's a really wasteful thing to just go, we'll just get somebody else. I don't like that mentality. I don't like that attitude. I like the idea of investing in the people that you've got and who love their job and are dedicated to it, but maybe they're having a difficult time. And, by investing in them, you might discover something about them that you didn't know, and they might be able to bring something positive about their experience to other people. So it's it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely something when we look at the power of interventions that are in different ways. So it's not just about private medical health care that gives counselling or a bit of training. It's about saying, well, if you go and have a holiday and a break, for example, you're going to be more productive. If you have good sleep hygiene, you're going to have, I know when I have, well, so oversharing once again, but menopausal symptoms, there are days when actually sleep is kind of the roller coaster that anyone in this space will understand. So I know that there are days when actually the best thing to do, as long as I haven't got meetings and any deadlines, is to go and have a good walk and or a swim or whatever to restore my well-being before I come back to work. It's definitely something I'm still practicing, but I'm getting better at it, and I know I'm more productive for it. And I also know that then has an impact on my health, my sleep, which means I feel better. And I know that because I lead my business by saying to anyone that works with us, I'm Sarah's gonna love this, leave loudly. It works. People know it demonstrates a culture where people feel safe, hopefully, to say that's okay, to do that themselves. But we're really small, we're a tiny team, hopefully going to expand as time goes on. And I think but I think that's a foundation that's really important in bigger studios, even 11 people, is that kind of, how are you saying, I'm not okay, and then saying, this is what helps me with my productivity. I really think this also then talks into the talk earlier on self-advocacy, but actually there is that space to say it's okay to recognise that we're all different.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on that point, I think there's too much onus and attachment and productivity is the amount of hours sat at your desk.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely not the case. I think you have to appreciate that everybody's different and people have different styles of working. We have a whole range of people at Lab 42. We have people with ADHD that need to get up and get down and have breaks and whatever. We have people that need to hyper-focus. We have people that prefer to have meetings walking outside. We have people with 1,000,001 tabs open and listening to videos and at the same time as doing the work. I think that's okay. You have to do whatever works best for the individual, and the payback is that their productivity is actually higher than if you say, well, I saw you come in at 9 and you left at 4. What's that about? So there's an element of flexibility and treating people as individuals and understanding what their preferred style of work is.
I think if we have that culture of saying, well, we work from 11 till 4, we kill productivity, actually. I mean, in my world, there's a lot of research that would demonstrate that, but I think I've got cat hair on my face. Sorry. I think there's, but I do think that I think it stifles creativity and therefore productivity. So I think that's really important. Do you think there's been an impact on mental health conditions? I mean, this should be a fairly obvious question, but do you think the hybrid and remote world amplifies the mental health case? And how do you think studios can overcome that? I'm going to go to you, Ella.
I think it's tricky because often when we meet face to face, we can sense more if there is anything that is wrong. But when we're all remote, it's very easy to smile and be happy for 20 minutes. And then when the camera is off, that is where you kind of you fall down. So it is, and not everybody is upfront and honest about how they feel, what it is that they're going through. So it's easier when you have a small team, but you need to be vigilant. You need to be open. You need to look into and learn how to look into behaviors online as well as face to face.
What's the barriers that people have to being open and candid about that?
Some are oversharers.
Yeah.
Some basically want to keep everything inside. And
How do you navigate that? How do you communicate that, do you think?
I'm an extrovert that gave birth to an introvert, and he's 20 today, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. So I just think it is. You need to build trust.
Yeah.
And trust isn't given, but I've always said trust also needs to be respected. And we are allowed, like you said, we are allowed to be as different and alike as we are. But if we don't have that solid ground of being able to there is one thing I notice is that the more withdrawn people are, the more is something that they're struggling with. And I often say we need to also to be, like I said earlier in the previous one, is about venting out. Because often when it's in our heads, just by talking about it, then we are kind of like, we are basically diminish the power that the thoughts have in our minds. But if we are working remotely, we don't have anybody to bounce off, or somebody who will, by the coffee machine, hey, is everything okay? So we need to be a little bit more vigilant, but it's easier with a team of 11 than it is for the larger. Basically after 11, every 5 employees after that comes with different challenges.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to nurturing and empowering both what we want the culture to be, how safe, how we work together, how we address the tough conversations. Because that was one of the first, we need to be able to address the hard conversation nobody wants to talk about.
Is it communication style?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's a very Nordic company, plus one very honest Frenchman, which I absolutely love.
So, I mean, I think communication comes down to a lot of this, doesn't it? If we talk about compassion as well, it's still a different form of communication.
It's also cultural differences. It is what comes natural to you might not come natural to somebody else. But if we are curious, if we really want to know the people around us, it's the differences also, which is the most amazing thing that we learn, because we learn things from different aspects, because both of us can be, basically, we can be talking about the same thing, but the person in between, that is an ocean, because it's the way we say things, especially when we have different languages, and English isn't our first language. So there are numerous of different ways of how we can be different, but being different doesn't mean that it's wrong. That's also how we learn and broaden how we work and communicate.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think there is just I keep hearing this same theme of this compassion and understanding. I just wonder how we amplify that through deeper connections, so that using the human passport that Lisa Marie Hall was talking about earlier, and those methods of just saying, I communicate in a different way, but also when I'm having a down day or a difficult day, perhaps they also interplay there. As you know, in our work we use things like disability passports, but I'm actually wondering where there is actually a thing where we, those human passports are taken to a different level, that says, actually, I also have difficult days, and on those difficult days I'm not going to I may try and come to work. In my case, I may try and come to work, but actually the best thing for me is to not be there. That doesn't mean that I won't catch up in productivity results later. And actually that sense of feeling trusted to do that is really important, isn't it?
Exactly.
So we've talked about productivity, and we've sort of talked about the compassion and the different interventions. I sort of wanted to look at kind of the leadership role and that space where sort of, do you think leaders reflect on their own role in wellbeing enough, and even their own challenges with it enough? Kat, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, kind of following on from what we were just talking about there, like I think it's always been, transparency has always been like a massive thing for me, and while we are a big company, I'm biased, but we've got our directors are always on hand, they're always there, they're always around, and it's not to micromanage anybody. Like, they let everybody get on with whatever they're getting on with, but they're present and they're there. And it's really nice because they're just hanging around like one of the team, and it's really nice because they're approachable and they're personable, and you know, they're really aware of all of these issues, and like you said, I like to use the word issue, but there are all of these things that are a big factor of the workplace. And when I started there, I obviously I've got ADHD, and I only got diagnosed in my 30s. For my entire life, I got told by every employer and everyone at school and everyone that I had a bad attitude. And it was really, really tough, because honestly, I was just like, but I'm working really hard and I'm trying my best and I'm trying everything I can do to be the best person I can. And it was just like, you've got a bad attitude, bad attitude. And so when I started working for Electric Square and Lively, I was like, do I tell them that this is a thing because you're worried about how are they going to perceive me? Are they going to think that I'm going to cause problems? Like, do they think I'm going to be taking all this time off work and all of this? And it was just really stressful. And I just thought, you know what, start as you mean to go on. I'm going to be honest with them and tell them. And they were aware of it, and they were absolutely amazing. And based off the back of those things, they often put themselves forward for training. And for mental health training and all the training that I've provided for them through different companies about neurodiversity, about the menopause, about all these different things that we want to champion. They're the first people to be interested and sign up. And it's not a case of virtue signaling or just being seen to be doing the right thing. They genuinely care, because as the company has grown and we've got bigger, they don't want to lose touch of that. Because it's so easy to, like you said, in a smaller company, like 11 people. I used to work for small companies and I loved it. And getting in more and more people, it's stressful because you don't want to lose touch of that. It's really important. But if it's coming from the top down, if the directors are championing it and wanting to do it, then it sets the example from the get-go. And it's like, well, this is what they're doing, this is what we're all doing, and that's that. So, yeah.
And that goes to that leave loudly phrase that I know is really important. Leave loudly, if you don't know, is the sort of the role modelling, is what am I doing to leave loudly? What am I doing to show other people that it's okay, particularly as a leader, that it's okay to take time off. It's okay to go to sports day. It's okay to pick the kids up from school, whatever you, whether with your mom or dad. It's okay to say, I'm having a bad day, I'm coming in a bit late. And those are really important, because if you can see yourself in your leaders, you know it's safe to do so. And of course that fits with the EDI work, but that also fits with mental well-being and mental health. And I use the phrase quite a lot of mental unhealth. So we all have, we have unhealthy moments with our physical body, we have unhealthy moments with our mental health. And even if you haven't got a diagnosed mental health condition, there will be days, there are times in our lives when it's tough, isn't it? And as a leader, it's important to lead into that and say, I recognise that. My view of myself is that I'm high performing or whatever it is, but I understand that everybody is different and that how they achieve our goals are different. And I think that's a really important space. So it's really good to hear that Electric Square sort of demonstrate that in that way. Kirsty, what about sort of Sumo? I know Sumo Digital and Lab 42. What happens with you in terms of those leadership roles? And I know what you want to disclose.
What shall I say first? To counter Kat's point, I find in the games industry in particular, sometimes we can be guilty of recruiting and promoting people into leadership roles purely based on their competencies in their discipline. So I don't always think that there's a natural correlation. Just because you're an excellent coder doesn't necessarily follow that you are an excellent leader. And I think we need to get better at that as an industry and recognise the people side of things a little bit more. That said, at Lab 42, we're very, very fortunate to have a studio director who does lead by example. So they have children at school age, and they do school pickups, school drop-offs. They go to plays, concerts, sports days, all the things that are involved with having children, and it's in their diary, it's baked into their diary. We know that they won't be available at that time, and that is absolutely okay, and it sends the message out to the rest of the team that it's okay for you to do that too. So I'm very, very grateful for that. I, on the other hand, I'm not a practicer of what I preach quite often. I'm one of those people that will pick an email up on a Saturday at 9:50 in the evening, whatever. I know. One of the things I am good at, though, is being quite open with my studio, my own mental health struggles and diagnosis. So I've never kept anything like that a secret with my team, which again, I think, hopefully sets out that it's okay not to be okay, and hopefully gives a bit of a positive story as well. So you can still function, you can still do your job, you can still be productive if you have mental health struggles. It's, you know, it's you can still
adapt,
work.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that sends a nice message out to the rest of the team that they can also be open with the rest of the team in the studio.
I think those are really good points. I wanted to just pick up on your technical skill point. My husband is a UX consultant, and he trained as a Samaritan about 2 years ago, and he says it's the best thing. I would say it's also the best thing he did for our marriage too, but but it's been really good because he's got a real level of empathy, and he says actually he can now apply that empathy in technical conversations, because obviously a lot of UX is about asking questions to get to an answer. So on that kind of point, Ella, I just wanted to look at, sort of come to you and say, in a small team where you are all very technical, as well as sort of leading and what have you, do you sort of see that space it's important for you to balance those skills between technical and leaning in to sort of the leadership, the kindness in leadership that we expect?
It is. Weirdly enough, I'm not technical, but I've, for the past 20 years, usually been more on the technical side rather than finance or because I like being there, because I like my teams, and I've always protected people. And with I don't think it is a surprise with anybody where they realize being dyslexic or ADHD and what comes with it, because I've been very honest about it, because I wanted to return the shame. And being an introvert, being an extrovert, these are just words. It doesn't define a human being. And it all comes down to, and I can't emphasize more of it, it comes down to respect and kindness. And a leader, to your point, and this is often why I think that companies fail when they look at, oh, I'm in a leadership role. But that role came with a position. But that person might have no experience into it. And as a leader in a company, it's the same like being a parent or any of that, or a role model. People need to respect and trust you. You can't just, I'm not going to go in and tell my team how they should, basically what they should do better within the back end, because I think that it is about respecting. And I think that is often when we go in and people are like, oh, I'm in a leadership position. It can backfire, because if you haven't got the qualifications, if you don't have the ability of getting people together and making them feel safe, making them feel like they're listened to and we're all in this together, then you're just being somebody who's telling somebody else what to do based on what you think. And you don't do that within a team that you know that they have much more experience. So you need to work with them, not come in and think that you know better because that's how it works on paper. because we can put everything down on paper, but reality, that is completely different. And that work is down to all of us. Because you can be in a leadership role, but we can all be leaders and supporters. It doesn't matter what position that you are within a company, big or small.
It's how you make connections to people, and it's how you understand and that people's differences. And again, you know, although this may sound, if you sort of we're not somebody making decisions around kind of what mental health, how to support mental health in your studios and things, it might sound that it's perhaps intangible or perhaps not that relevant, but actually the point there is that when we don't build connection, we don't understand, and the bigger we get, the more remote the further away, particularly in the leadership space, we get from those on the ground conversations. We forget that actually humans, and it's humans making the games, it's humans making the coming up with the ideas for the games. It's humans that are, it's also humans that play it, and so whatever we're creating, if we're not understanding and compassionate towards those people, the game development process isn't as great. The outcomes of the game aren't as great, and overall it has a huge, probably has an impact on audience numbers. Not that I've ever looked into that, but I'm sure it would, and I'm sure that translates. Is that, you know, if you can show, you know, build a narrative in even the game that shows that, you know, and we've seen that, haven't we? And I can't remember what the name of the game was. What was it? Hell something? That's just recently shown some really, Hellblade was it? Yeah, it's really shown some good narrative around mental health condition. And I think if we can start to show that, even on that level as a leadership, we can start to learn ourselves about things. I want to just pick up on that and go into that a bit deeper, because, you know, generationally, we've now got up to 5 generations in the workplace. So we've got this a real gap. And my generation, I've already said I'm menopausal, so I'm not giving anything away about age-wise. They had a very different contract with work to the contract that younger people are seeing coming in and asking for. So I'm a mum to 2 teenage daughters, and I can tell you how much they tell me off for not caring about their mental health when I'm obviously trying my very best too. And so they're a lot more knowledgeable than I was at their age. Are you seeing, Kat, any differences in that in the workplace?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we get a lot of graduates like fresh out of uni, so babies, absolute babies. I hate them all. Yeah, it's everything is different. Their attitude to work is different. Doesn't mean it's worse. It's different. How they show up for work, in every sense of the word, and like a lot of it is great, because, you know, they're fresh out of uni, they're very eager, they're very confident, they've got a lot to prove. It's amazing to see. They bring a lot of life to the studio. But, you know, when I was younger, there was this like instillment of fear in me, like, I have to be a certain way, I have to speak a certain way, I have to do things a certain way, otherwise I'm going to lose my job. Like, it was just, I was totally fearful of everything I did, because I don't know, I think it was just like the generation that I came from. And so seeing them, as you say, like challenging people about how to do things, and you know, how they want to be treated, how they want to be spoken to, I think it's great. I'm all for it. I'm like, yeah, let's riot. I'm all for it. I'm like, yeah, man. Like,
Probably don't riot.
Probably don't, because it means I'll have to clean it up, and I don't want to do that. But a lot of paperwork. But yeah, I'm all about people speaking their mind, speaking their truth within reason, and being fair and honest about it. And they're brave enough to do that, and I think that's great. And it's good for the older people in there. Because they're getting a new lease of life out of these people. It's like, oh yeah, why don't I do that?
Is it challenging their thinking, do you think? Is it challenging their view?
Yeah.
Or is it creating friction?
It starts with friction,
Yeah.
because it's like they're finding it difficult working cheek by jowl, like having like massively opposing ideas about how you should come to work and how you should behave at work and all of this stuff. I mean, it's not like they're doing anything crazy, but they're just like you said about your teenage daughters, they're just saying stuff. They're just like, I don't want to be spoken to like that. I don't appreciate that. And it's like, oh, I want some of that. Give me. And then you've got the other people who they're just like, they don't say a word out of fear. So they feel a certain way, but they're afraid to, because it's like, well, that's not how I do things, and that's not how it used to be. And it's like, it's a brave new world, man. Like, I'm all for it. I think we should definitely, with respect, and obviously always with respect, but ask for what you need. And they're brave enough to do that.
Yeah, and I think we've got an increase in information awareness now, aren't we? Because, I know younger generations definitely much more digitally aware. They've grown up with this world, where we made it, basically. And I think there's a much more awareness, and my kids will just come through and go, "I've just seen it on TikTok." But take that as you will. But they are a lot more knowledgeable. Sometimes I would argue that knowledge can be confusing. It can be misinformation, disinformation, and what have you. And I think that has an impact. I think that increases the friction in work. What about you there, Kirsty? Do you see that there's sort of a difference between the generational?
Absolutely. I think, back to Kat's point, I think expectations are much higher in the younger generations in terms of how they're treated. I think they tend to, this is a massive sweeping statement now, but I think with all their exposure to social media, etc., I see more struggles. I tend to have, I'm a mental health first aider as well. I would say a high proportion of my conversations are with younger folk, and I have to take that into account. I think with all the uncertainty that's going on in the industry at the moment, I notice that older generations that have seen this cycle before are taking it more in their stride, because they've seen it and they've been through it, and they know it is a cycle and things will pick up. But obviously folk that are newish to the industry and it's their first break into the industry, it's obviously a cause of quite a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. So you're seeing an increase in numbers coming to mental health first aid champions as a result of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in a smaller studio where you don't necessarily have mental health first aid champions, you seeing, and you may not have kind of the biggest, widest gap of generations, but are you seeing, with the uncertainty, an increase in an issue?
So within our team, we're very experienced from, most of us have worked within larger studios before, or larger companies before. And that is hence the reason for how we operate and how we are building communication. Everything is, because the thing is, everything is either first-hand experience, what is going on in the industry, or second-hand. And it is hard because we do feel, and then we feel hopeless if we can't help. But within how we do this, we need to be the help for one another.
Yes.
And that has been from the beginning. But for me also now, because will we be able to continue being like this and scaling that level of the culture, the more the company is going to grow, because it is quite unique. So it's like I say, it's culture differences. It's between the experience that we come to the table.
Yeah, so you're seeing the breadth of that in the culture differences, less so in the generational different.
Oh, they are much younger than me, but I have never felt as supportive. That being about menopause, that being, we talk about everything, bless them.
Because they want to learn. Do you think that is? Because they want to understand?
I think it's more sympathy. I remember one day my famous words were like basically F menopause. And it was one of the first meetings that I had with them, because they have more understanding. And like I say, a few of them had gone through IVF with a partner. And so there is about what hormones do to the body. They have that understanding, and when you have that understanding, you have more compassion. But it isn't just brushed off. And
Yeah. I wonder whether that leads into that kind of increase in information that we've all got used
Definitely.
to, wanting to know more and being more curious, able to access more information as well. And I wonder whether that kind of opens into, if you're a studio on a budget, which, like will be compared to Sumo or wherever, there's that kind of, well, what else can you do? If you're small, it's very different to the bigger studios, isn't it? And so actually, perhaps those sort of listening skills is actually the foundations to an opening, forcibly working on a culture that's open and listening and learning and sharing information.
And being vulnerable is a strength, it isn't a weakness.
Yes, absolutely. Brené Brown's work about
Yeah.
vulnerability, if you haven't read that. I think I'm being told time up. Yeah. The clock's not right. Okay. Well, thank you. We did actually get to the end of the questions anyway, which was great. So, but I just wanted to end on one thing, really, is if studios, we've got a whole diversity in size of studios, and so, anything from the little micro right up to these sort of big super studios. And I just wanted to sort of think, just pick, if you were a small studio and you being one of them, like, what would it be that small studios could take away and start doing today?
That's easy. Listen.
Brilliant, and that's free.
It's free, because the thing is, to build up the strength, that comes from everybody within the team. It does not come just from the team leader.
Yes, you'll replicate the same message.
Yeah.
Kirsty.
Really, really quickly, carry out a mental wellbeing risk assessment, the same way as you would carry out a fire risk assessment. So go through your processes in your business and identify pinch points that may influence mental health. If you can afford to, get a mental health first aider in. Utilise the people within the company, because if you create a culture where they feel safe enough to be open about their own issues, they are an amazing source of help for the rest of the company. Utilise third-party experts like Yuki Raise the Game, like Safe in Our World, loads and loads of free or low-cost advice. And just work on your culture, I think is a key message.
Invest in the people that you've got. Like, they're there for a reason. They have been loyal to you. They like their job. They wouldn't be there if they didn't. And if you just invest in what you have already, and that doesn't necessarily mean with money, it just means with time and listening and everything that you've already got your hands on, you'll find that they will give back so much more if you just support them and invest in them.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for joining me today. I hope today's been useful to all of you.